Hello, welcome back to my channel, and today we're going to be talking about specifically the moon in Taurus and moon in the second house. So if you're new to my channel, hi, hello, my name is Brandon. I do astrology videos here, and I will be talking about specifically today what the moon means in Taurus as well as what the moon means in the second house. So I've been doing this whole series here for all of the different Taurus placements. I have all the Aries placements and first house placements already done, so there's a series on my channel you can look out for that, and I'll be going through every single planet in every single sign and house in that order, essentially. So this second series is all of the Taurus placements. So today we're going to be talking about specifically the moon in Taurus as well as the moon in the second house. So if you happen to have the moon in Taurus, this video is for you. And if you also happen to have the moon in the second house, this video is also for you. Now, there is going to be in the description box below these two little timestamps you can kind of check out specific to if you have the moon in Taurus, and then also if you have the moon in the second house. If you don't know if you have the moon in the second house, the moon in Taurus, there's also going to be a link in the description box for you to check out to figure out if you have the moon in Taurus or the moon in the second house. So that is really what I'm going to be doing here today. I really love doing this. This is one of my favorite placements. Weirdly enough, I'm actually recording this right as the moon actually entered into Taurus, weirdly enough. So I am quite excited about that. The moon just went into Taurus a couple minutes ago, and so there's going to be quite a lot of attunement with lunar energy. And so in the next portion, I'm just going to talk about specifically what the lunar energy kind of means within a natal chart and how to kind of work with it and how we kind of understand from an astrological perspective how the moon will work within a natal chart. So I'll see you guys in the next part where we talk about the moon in astrology. Okay, so when it comes to the moon in astrology, there's some specific things that we really need to talk about when it comes to the lunar energy, because the lunar energy has a lot of very sensitive things about it, okay? So I talk about this moon placement knowing that this is going to be a little bit more emotionally charged than average. Granted, the moon in Taurus does quite well in its ability to keep emotional stability. However, the moon in general rules our emotional needs, how we meet our emotional needs, what we need to kind of keep ourselves regulated, right? How do we regulate ourselves? How do we emotionally nourish ourselves? How do we create emotional safety for ourselves? What does that look like, right? How do we really take care of our inner world so that we can go and do the solar things? That's why the sun and the moon are very important, because they work together to really help us really show up in the world in the way that we're supposed to. And if your moon is not well placed, or you have some difficult things within your emotional regulation system, outside of it being even linked to astrology, there's going to be a lot of difficulties that you're going to run into throughout your day-to-day in functioning, in working, in certain things that you're not going to feel safe in your entire system. And so the moon is one of the most I say primal, but primal also has more of like a Martian quality to it. But it's one of the most like instinctive sort of ways that we look at things. So when we are thinking of lunar energy, we think about how we want safety, right? What is our instinct? If we want to, really, really feel safe and secure, and we're feeling threatened, for an example, what do we do to like maintain that security, right? If we're out and about and we feel unsafe, what do we do to maintain that safety or to regain that safety? Or if we're dealing with an emotional sort of nature or an emotional situation within our life, how do we regulate ourselves after that trigger? And how do we approach our emotions, right? Is it in this very like logical way, in a very like let's talk things out? Is it in a very emotional kind of feeling it out way, letting it kind of run through you? Is it in a more substance abuse sort of way, escapism way? Is it using food or different sort of coping mechanisms to help us get through? Like, how do we emotionally regulate, right? And so the moon also rules, in addition to that, it rules a lot of our family conditioning. It's a very sensitive point in the chart, and I talk about the moon in a way that I really want it to be very evident that there's a lot of care that's needed for the moon sign, for you to understand your moon sign, for you to connect with your moon sign. And that care also comes from how you were taken care of as a child, from your parent, from your parental figure, how that safety was given or not given to you, and how you therefore found ways to survive. And so when it comes to the moon specifically within a natal chart, it's really, really important to give yourself a sense of safety, a sense of security, a sense of like, of knowing that this is such a sensitive part in everyone's chart. The moon is our most like, if you can hit someone's moon and you can really nourish that and connect with that, you are going to do really, really great things. And in the same way, if you kind of nick that, if you kind of harm that in some sort of, intentional or unintentional actions, that can cause a lot of emotional dysregulation and emotional kind of outlash. And kind of like pain and trauma and things. And so it's really important to have an emotional awareness. And I really hope that going into this video, you guys are taking it with a grain of salt, and really wanting to look at this from a perspective. If there's someone on the internet who talks about astrology, I want to learn about this, right? And I want you to really know that there's there's a lot of importance in the moon specifically, in all of astrology, but specifically in the moon, to listen to yourself through that process. Listen to your emotions. Listen to how you're responding to what I'm saying about your moon placement. And this is true for any of the moon signs that I'm going to be talking about throughout this series here. But it's really important to be able to listen to your own emotional system and regulate that and work with that as you kind of work through these things. So just know that's the moon placement in general. Also, depending upon where the moon sits by house, that area of the chart's going to have a lot of ups and downs, right? Because the moon waxes and wanes, it's always moving. So it's going to have this very fluid kind of quality to it relative to the house that it's placed in. In this video today, we're going to talk about the second house, so we'll get to that when we get to that portion. But whatever area is kind of being connected to the moon is going to have this very sensitive quality to it, but also in a weird way, a very unstable quality to it because of the fact that it's always moving, it's always up and down, it's always kind of in various phases, right? It's a new moon, it's a full moon, it's all over the place, it's an eclipse, right? There's all these very lunar qualities that we tend to see throughout the lunar phase, and it affects our house placement and of course the sign that it's in as well. So just look at the moon placement, understand that it represents, the mother, your emotional nurturing, how you take care of yourself, your feelings too, a lot of the things that you really, really value. You see with especially with moon in the second house, you're going to see a lot with that, which I personally have moon in the second house. So this is a very personal video for me to talk about too. But I really, really hope that with this video, as I go through the moon signs, and moon in the Taurus, or moon in Taurus, moon in the second house, you will be able to kind of take something from this. With all that being said, we're going to move into the next part. We talk specifically about the moon in Taurus. Okay, so when it comes to the moon being in the sign of Taurus, so if you have your moon sign, you know that it is quite well in Taurus. If you have your moon sign in Taurus, you know it's going to be a really good placement because people speak so highly on an exalted moon. So what is an exalted placement? An exalted placement pretty much means that placement has a lot more of a capacity to do really, really well. So these are the signs that the moon, or that planets do really well and exceptionally well. There's a lot of support from the planet in question to the sign that it is placed in. And with the moon in Taurus, this is one of the first like exalted placements that I've actually done in this series so far, that outside of the sun in Aries that I did, that has a lot of power to it. So when someone has an exalted moon, obviously there's going to be some various aspects going on and things like that. We're not going to talk about that today. But when it comes to the moon in Taurus, there's this like very grounded sensory experience. So when we think about the moon, it rules how we were cared for, how we had this, kind of like emotional upbringing. And when it's in Taurus, it's almost like a very like, just kind of like steady, kind of caretaking, kind of like more calmer sort of child that kind of understands, okay, this is feeding time, this is what I need to do. It tends to have more of a secure attachment to the parent. And granted, this is not me saying this is like a one size fits all, because it's not the case for anything in astrology, and no one should ever speak like that when it comes to astrology. But at the end of the day, the moon in Taurus typically has been associated with a more healthier sort of relationship to the family unit. It can almost make, there's certain people I know that have the moon in Taurus really like public, like moon in Taurus in the 10th, right? And they literally do business with their mother, and the mother relationship can almost have such a strong kind of imprint on this person in a way that they know they're going to get success through their connection with their mother, and they feel really, really safe with their mother. On the flip effect too, when we go to like Scorpio, which is the fallen side of the moon, there can be almost this kind of fear of working with the mother for failure, essentially, that may be associated with that, or a fear of failure with working with the mother, versus moon in Taurus in the 10th, or moon in Taurus in general. There's a very strong family figure, almost can potentially be stronger than the actual native themselves. So this can make the family unit and family business very prominent for the moon in Taurus, and it can also make for someone who has a very sensitive relationship to food, money, and values, but it is something that they are very in tune with. They're very sensory, and it's so fun doing this video or this series in a whole span of a week, because it really gets me sitting in these Taurus second house themes. And the moon in Taurus is one of the most, like, Venus in Taurus is still kind of like this too, but I feel like moon in Taurus has such like a aesthetic to it that so many other Taurus placements don't have, because the moon in Taurus is almost this like real, like soft, caring. Think of like, I think of like just going out and like having ice cream and having all these beautiful sensory experiences and just kind of being very stable. Like I was watching last night this is so random, but this kind of feels relevant. I was watching the episode last night of Black Mirror that has a lot to do with like it's called Nosedive, and it has a lot to do with like this idealized image of beauty that comes through social influence and being able to keep your emotional center, right? And if any of you haven't watched it, I would definitely recommend watching it. It's a really cool episode. It's really eye-opening. But it speaks a lot to the containment of your emotions and kind of putting up a front, but also in a way that is very pristine and very beautiful and very capable. And I think when you speak about the moon in Taurus, there's this quality to it where it has a lot of emotional stability, and because it has that, typically it is able to kind of take care of itself in other ways. It's almost like if I have my emotions secure, if I have my emotions under control, then everything else kind of just works, and I can deal with other things in my life because I know that I have my emotional center. And when we see the moon in Taurus, there is a lot more of a pull towards natural emotional stability that causes the native to just be like, okay, I know what I have to do emotionally to take care of myself. I know that I have to work on, my relationship with food or my body. They're very connected to their body and their senses. It's almost, I would say this is moon in the first can kind of have this too, and so can moon in Cancer. But moon in Taurus, I think, is one of the most like physically connected signs, and especially if it's like moon in Cancer in the first house. These are people, moon in Taurus in the first house. The moon in Taurus has such a connection to the body that if it was in the first house, these people can have such a, like, these are like pure body workers and people that are healers, and people that feel things in their body in such a sensitive way, but in a way that is their gift, right? When you have an exalted placement, a lot of the time, that is one of your gifts. When you have exalted or domicile placements, or even sometimes fallen placements too, they don't speak on that a lot, but when you have a planet that's in like extremes of dignity, meaning, you know, it's in its own sign, it's in a sign that doesn't, the opposite sign that it doesn't, or the opposite sign of its rulership, or it's exalted or it's fallen, you can almost manifest a lot more with that placement. And with those that have moon in Taurus, I really urge you to think about how you can utilize your emotional stability and your emotional reactions and strength as a asset and as a gift, as opposed to you know, something to run from. Look at it as something to rely on. Like, you have a lot of reliability in your emotional sense with the moon in Taurus. It can, because it is a fixed sign, it can have almost a like a know-it-all stubbornness to it as well, because we see that with most fixed sign placements, there can be this almost like it's my way and it's worked for me and that's it. And because it works for me, it must, you know, this is the way it is, right? It almost like they don't want to change in their position. And so you can find that with moon in Taurus, there may be this kind of like fixed value system or fixed, you know, like emotional way or way of dealing with their emotions that might not be the same for everybody, or might not be healthiest for everybody, but it works for them. It's almost like this could be someone who, to a degree, if it's linked to other parts of the chart, could be someone who is like preachy about their diet, right? Someone who is like, oh, I know exactly what works for my body, and this works for my body, and I take these herbs, and I do this diet, I eat this thing. And because of the way it's, you know, the fixed nature of the moon in Taurus, it almost can be like, I know this will work for your emotion and your system because it works for me. And that's the biggest thing about the moon and everything with astrology, is it's so subjective to the individual. And it's really important to know that not every single moon in Taurus is going to have the exact same experience. Not every single planet and every single sign is going to have any of the same experiences. Rather, they're going to have kind of the same kind of theme running through it, kind of the same sort of thread. But at the end of the day, their way of responding can be very different. And so overall, like, the moon in Taurus does have this very like strong, steadfast, very stable quality to it, but dependent upon you know, the other parts of the chart, there might be this very, you know, like overly emotionally protective nature that might come from, you know, some sort of difficulty with family, or difficulty with a control aspect of the parent. You know, and it's almost like that strength that you have emotionally comes from needing to be strong, if you will, right? And as opposed to it needing to be like a very, you know, beautiful, soft sort of thing, right? And we see that, like, when it comes to Taurus placements, it's really important to look at where Venus is placed in the chart, because this will tell you if there's like a very difficult kind of way that the moon is regulating itself, or if there's more of a smooth way. Like, so for example, if the moon was in Taurus with Venus in Taurus, this would be someone that I would kind of bring back to what I was saying in the beginning of like this very stable, very strong, very capable kind of emotional maturity and kind of softness, right? They kind of have this more luxurious kind of stance on things for the most part. Versus like if we have a moon in Taurus and let's say, you know, Venus is in Aries, right? When Venus in Aries, there's this very like me, selfishness sort of thing to it. And so they could be great with regulating their own emotions, but not necessarily thinking about another person, right? When we think about the Venus in Aries, one of the difficulties they have is looking for how it relates to the other. But then we see with moon in Taurus, there's a lot of emotional stability. So there's a lot to this, guys. I really want you to know that there's a lot more to these things than just your moon sign or just any singular placement. And so it's really hard as a professional astrologer to go onto these things and kind of just focus on the one point that is the moon in Taurus in this example, and not kind of give you more to kind of look at, because at the end of the day, astrology is such a wide range of things and a wide range of looking at yourself, that if you can learn to read a natal chart, if you can learn to self-assess and self-analyze through astrology, this is one of the greatest gifts that you can have. And that's why I'm making this video today. It's why I'm doing this whole long series, so that I can teach people more about themselves at the end of the day. And with that too, just because it feels relevant, I do have in the description box below, I'm going to have my beginner's astrology course that teaches you all of those things. If you're interested in that, feel free to go down there. But overall, with the moon in Taurus is, you guys have this very strong, steadfast, stable nature to you. And I really would urge you to look to see what house the moon is placed in as well, because that's going to show you where that emotional stability lies. Where your capacity is so kind of exalted. It's so easily put above itself and successful in a lot of ways. And so look at your finances, look at your values, look at what you care about, and look at your Venus sign too with the moon in Taurus. If we're kind of starting there, especially if your moon in Taurus becomes really important, let's say you are a Cancer sun, Cancer rising, then your moon becomes a lot more prominent than the average sort of moon in Taurus placement. So, like I said, there's all these different layers to it, and I don't try and complicate it too much. But I really hope that all you moon Tauruses feel loved and cared for. And that's the thing about the moon Taurus. I think a lot of content out there is going to speak so highly on the moon Taurus, and there is that shadow side of it, which can be to a detriment in the sense of it kind of knows best, or even the mother knows best. There's a lot of that with the moon Taurus where it's almost oh, my mother knows best, right? And it's interesting because another thing that just happened right before I was walking in here was I'm recording this at the library, right? And this feels relevant because I was walking past Jeanette McCurdy's book that was I'm So Glad My Mom Died, where she speaks about her mom and how her mom abused her throughout her career and things like that. And she actually, if memory serves me correctly, that she actually has an exalted moon in Taurus on the midheaven, I believe, that has created a very strong career through the mother. And I'm just checking it really quick. And there's a very prominent power that the mother was able to bring. And I think that there is so her moon was in Taurus, exalted towards the top of the chart, with Mars in Taurus, which I'll be talking about tomorrow actually. And so we see with the moon in Taurus towards the top, this is a good example of someone whose mother was, their sort of, whose mother was a reasoning for their career, or they were doing it for their family. That's another thing too. You see with moon Taurus, moon Capricorn, a lot of moon earth signs too, this working for the family, providing financially for the family. And like I just said, she's actually a Cancer sun, so that moon in Taurus becomes a lot more prominent, of course, right? And so we see that there's this other aspect of it too with the moon Taurus of kind of the financial provider, the family lineage. And the thing is too with the moon, I didn't speak about this with the previous portion on the moon, and I should have, but it's also your relationship with the public. And so when you have the moon in Taurus, there is going to be this more steady, stable relationship with the public, or kind of more of it can be a vain relationship with the public, but it can be overall just a very this is what it is, right? In certain examples with Jeanette McCurdy's, right, she has moon in Taurus with Mars, which can, alleviate and exacerbate the need for public sort of recognition because it's in the 10th, right? And so depending upon where the moon sits, can be where this public perception is. And I'll definitely be talking about this with the moon in the 10th house portion, which is way away from now. But it is something that needs to be spoken about, because when we see the moon in Taurus, but in a house that is more public, we're going to see the emotional nature of that person be more outward and more public, right? So if we see, like I had said, moon in the 10th in Taurus, or moon in the 7th in Taurus, on an angle, or even in the first, right? Anything that's really towards the top of the chart, but even in the first, there's going to be a really prominent, emotional publicity, if you will, with that. So that's all to be said. That was a lot of just kind of things to kind of speak on. But yeah, the moon in Taurus has a very powerful placement, and it is a lot of power, but it's how you utilize your relationship with the public too, because the moon Taurus can have you have a very powerful relationship with the public, whether that moon is in a more private sector of the chart or not. So just look at that as well as you go through your own moon and Taurus story, and kind of unpack that, and how your family values and how your emotional security is created, essentially. So just wanted to add that to you guys. It felt relevant because Spirit is giving me weird signs when it comes to doing this series relative to, just seeing Jeanette McCurry's book, the relevance of that, and the episode I watched last night. So very strange, but just felt like it was important to bring that up. And so that's really the moon in Taurus portion. If you guys have moon in Taurus, feel free, please, to put it down below. I would love to hear more about your story and what that has looked like for you. And that's really it, like I said. And I'll see you guys in the next part. We talk about the moon in the second house. Okay, so we're going to talk about the moon in the second house. And the thing about this placement that I think is so important for me to start off right off the bat with is I have this myself, okay? And I think it's very important as an astrologer to be transparent about any time that there may be some biases in the way that you are perceiving a chart or delineating a specific placement. And so with my own moon in the second house, I have my own predispositions and biases and experiences that I will be drawing upon as I'm delineating this. And I just want to let you know that that may be part of this as well. And there are a lot of different things that I myself have to speak on with this, but there's a lot that I think I've seen a lot of moon second house people as well that have had their own stories relative to this that are very, very niche and very different than mine. But there is, once again, that overall theme. So I just want to let you guys know that I do have this placement, so there is going to be a little bit of biases and or personal experience put into this. So the moon in the second house, there is this importance when it comes to the moon in the second house. First of all, to understand, if you have your moon in the second house, I would recommend you figure that out first. Look down below. There's a video down, or a link down below that you can use to generate your chart to see if your moon is placed within the second house. And if it is, this video is for you. And so when it comes to the moon being placed in the second house, there is a very interesting relationship with finances and money. And of course, like when I first started getting into astrology many years ago, I went on the internet, much like you probably did to find this video, and I went and did all this research, and I was like, what does moon in the second house mean, right? And one of the biggest things that kept coming up was that your finances will have ups and downs, because as we speak on the moon, and this is more relative to the moon in the houses than it is in the signs, the area of life that the moon is placed in is going to have ups and downs. And so when it comes to the moon placed in the second house, your finances, your emotional connection to your money and your relationship with money is going to change over and over again. And so the thing about the moon in the second house, and this is something I've learned as well, with having the moon here, you're able to make a lot of success with money when you are in the public, when you are working with the public, because the moon does rule the public. It rules, how the masses are kind of responding. And so when it comes to the moon in the second house, these can be people that, and also this is kind of relative to Gemini risings as well, but this can also be people that work in restaurants, work in making money in ways that is very maternal and caring and kind of like home care, right? So I see a lot with when we have like a loaded second house, the moon isn't really necessarily going to load that second house up. It can, but the moon in the second house is going to make that financial life a sensitive point, a point that needs a lot of care, needs a lot of emotional nurturing, needs a lot of value kind of building within the native. So kind of like knowing how to emotionally regulate yourself when you don't have money, And also in the same vein, emotionally regulate yourself when you do have money, knowing when to spend, how to spend, what your relationship is like with money. And also, more importantly, and this is also true for the sun in the second house, but the moon in the second house, I think, is a lot more deep than the sun, where it's your bank account does not equate to your self-worth. Your bank account does not equate to your self-worth. What you own does not equate to your self-worth either. The things that you have do not equate to your self-worth. Those are worth things. Those are things that have value. And because you own them, yes, you necessarily, in some logical way, you have that value. However, it is not your only value. And that's the thing with the moon. The moon is a very deep, sensitive part. And it is something that, as I'm recording this, I am like hurting, I'm like, oh gosh, right? Because it's one of those things that when it comes to the moon in the second, it is so hard for us to be able to differentiate between those two things, between the physical and the emotional, and our connection to our finances, our money, our resources, our, what we own, our house, our family, all of those things. We're like, I am that. We're so emotionally connected to the physical, to our bodies, to our money, to what we do to make money, that it's very important that we are able to see past that and see the value within us. I know that sounds so cheesy, but it's so true. Like, for us to be able to see deeper within ourselves and say, yes, I have these things and I have this money and I have, this privilege and this opportunity, but beyond that, beneath that, who am I, right? And that can be a scary thing, especially when we live in a very capitalistic and materialistic society. The moon in the second house, in certain ways, in certain placements, can be very materialistic, can almost only see themselves in a very financially focused way. Like they can make a lot of money when it comes to the moon in the second house, because their emotions are so tied into their money-making ability and their capacity for money, and their value systems, how they save money, how they spend money. And so their minds and their emotions are so connected to how they make money. Literally, I tell my people all the time, every day I wake up, I just think about money. Almost all the time I'm thinking about money. I'm also thinking about friends and things to do and stuff like that. For me, I have my moon in Aquarius in the second, so that's part of it, right? But at the end of the day, moon in the second, it's like I'm always emotionally invested into money. And there's a lot in this conversation that I think, the second house conversations I think are so interesting, because there's so much here to kind of unpack. And obviously I'm a second houser with the moon there myself, but there's so much within this kind of second house conversation relative to your own value, capitalism, how you're making your money, what you're using to make your money. And the things with the moon in the second house, you are going to be someone that is so emotionally invested into how you make your money. And that's the thing too. I think that with me, my money had to be something I was making that mattered to me, that was emotionally fulfilling, that wasn't just doing odd jobs. And I even remember back to like my first job when I was 16, which is like half my life ago, which is crazy. I remember even then, even though I worked the same hours, my paycheck would just be all over the place. It wouldn't be stable, right? It was like I would always kind of have this fluctuation in my finances. And there will be times where there'll be weeks that I'll make good money. There'll be months that I'll make good money. And there'll be times that I won't. And it's about being able to be appreciative of all of those waves and all of those ins and outs. And as time progresses, the moon kind of stabilizes itself and understands the waves of life. At an earlier age, it doesn't get, it kind of has this more of a reckless nature to its spending. Because like I said, the moon in the second, there's going to be a lot of emotional connections to spending. And I meant to talk about this with the Taurus portion, but I didn't with the moon. But it is still relevant to the second house too, but there is this aspect of food and substance related to the second house. And so when it came to certain people that have moon in the second house, moon in Taurus, there can be a interesting control issue around food, an interesting relationship around food that can be both very prominent, meaning like, they could have a career around food, they could be around restaurant industry sorts of things, they could be a chef, and then also on the polar opposite side of that, where there can be this sort of control narrative around food in regards to different disorders and things like that can come about. And we think about Demi Lovato is a very prominent moon Taurus individual, and I should have spoken on this in the last portion, but Demi Lovato has the moon Taurus opposite Pluto in Scorpio, and it's pretty tight from what I remember. And she is one of the, she has openly spoken about how she struggled with eating disorders and struggled in that regard. And so that's something that we see a lot with the moon Taurus, is there's this like very deep control. And if there is an aspect to Pluto, which is common for millennials, you'll see that there's this difficulty around emotional control. And with the moon in the second, this could be a financial emotional control. And I think it's a little bit deeper when we speak about aspects and things, obviously, but relative to just the moon in the second house, there is this prominence with being able to feel emotionally secure in your financial sector, right? Being able to think about your investments and your money and how you're making money. And if you have a well-placed moon in the second, you can do really well in a lot of different ways. But at the end of the day, the more you lean into lunar qualities, the more you're going to make money and the more you're going to feel fulfilled. There's a lot about emotional fulfillment with money. Like for me, a lot of what I do, it doesn't necessarily pay amazingly, right? It's not paying like ridiculous amounts of money, but it is something that I truly love emotionally, and my heart and soul is in it, and I really truly care about people that I impact, and the videos that I make, and the content that I do, and the readings that I do for clients. I am very caring, and I want to make sure that people that receive something from me and that also pay me understand how much I care. And I think that leans into the lunar quality with the moon in the second house. There is a lot of emotional connection to making money. And I think it's important to know what moon sign you have in that second house. Because if you have the moon in various different signs within the second house, it's going to play a little bit differently into what you're utilizing to make money. Like for me, it's an Aquarius moon, so I use the internet, astrology, my network, society at large to make money. Versus if it was, let's say the moon was in Leo, this would be a very different type of making money. This would be someone who would make money, could also be through content, but it would be more of a self-focused, showing themselves sort of way when we talk about that moon in Leo in the second. But at the end of the day, it's all about knowing that your emotions are linked to your value, and that's the thing is. It's so hard sometimes having a moon second house. You would think it'd be great, and I don't have other moon placements natally. I can't. Like my moon is always in the second, right? It's not going to go anywhere natally. But you would think having a moon in the second house would be like a somewhat exaltation, considering the moon is exalted in Taurus. However, it can have a little bit of that, and I have no way of kind of really discerning different because once again I'm biased. But at the end of it all, it does have a more stable approach that it builds over time. And I know quite a few other people that have the moon in the second house, and their finances are just as odd, and they're just as weird, and they're just as up and down and up and down. But a lot of them make a lot of money in restaurant. I did that at one point in time. And all of them really enjoy what they do, and they find a lot of emotional rush behind what they're doing, and they really care about all their money. But there can be an emotional attachment, almost too much emotional attachment to money with moon in the second house. It's a lot about being able to discern the difference between your money and your own self-value. So there's a lot of difficulty there. But there can be also with the moon in the second house, there can be making money through family business. You see that a lot with the moon in like earth signs or in earth houses. And there is this almost like there's this quality when it comes to the moon in the second that shows the family values, and the mother in specific. Her values are very imprinted on the native. I've seen that a lot with the moon in the second, where the mother's imprint is so much deeper. And for myself, being moon in Aquarius in the second, my mother at a very young age taught me to really care about society and to be humanitarian and to look at everybody and care about everybody from every walk of life. And I think and I know that has given me so much value in this life. And it has been a moral, ethical thing that I have been able to use to keep myself centered. And that's another thing with the second house, with the moon. The mother's ethics and values become a little bit more of your stability. And your moral compass is really important to navigate with the second house. And I've talked about this a lot with second house placements. But the moon there, it can change the ethics and the morals and the values throughout the lifetime, depending upon how much money you have. But at the end of it all, it is ideal to stabilize that and to see where those morals and ethics and values are coming from, and to see what it is that you are emotionally putting your energy into. Okay, and so the family values, the family relationship, the mother's values are really imprinted on the native with the moon in the second house. I've seen it in a lot of ways. Myself as well as others that have this. And there's a big care for protecting the family as well with the moon in the second. And two, there can be, interestingly enough, with the moon in the second, there can also be, I didn't speak on this with other portions really in this segment, Taurus segment yet, but singing voice, right? Moon in the second can have a very publicly accepted singing voice, because the second house rules the voice. And like the vocal quality, it rules the throat. And with the moon there, with a well-placed moon there, it can make for a very publicly accepted voice. And so there is this very interesting quality you see with moon in Taurus and also moon in second that can have, moon in second is a little bit different, but they can both indicate singers and indicate people that whose voices are utilized for the collective, but more so whose emotions and whose, it's more of like the singing aspect of it though. But it can be voices as well. But this is kind of a little bit more getting a little bit more out there with those. But in regards to like Mercury and stuff like that. But at the end of it all, moon in the second, it's really important, like I said, to just look at your ups and downs in life as emotional strengthening moments that will build your emotional tolerance in times when you don't feel like you have enough, or you don't feel like you are enough, because you are enough. You are valuable enough. You are deserving of everything that you want. And you just need to sit with the feelings in so many different avenues to really, really, really feel the deep value that you have. Maybe if you don't have those things, right? Or maybe if you have an abundance of those things, right? You need to be able to feel your value in all these different ways. And I spoke on this in another portion in this series, I can't remember which one, but relative to going to other environments and seeing, kind of flavoring those other environments and seeing, or not flavoring, tasting those other environments and seeing how your value feels within those spaces. Because the moon is a very sensitive planet, and the second house is kind of an environmental house too, because it is that structure, it is that house, like that literal house foundation that we build. And so your living arrangements can be very emotionally imprinted onto you, and very important for you to be in emotionally regulated spaces. And so go in the public, making money with the public, go in public places to make money, right? I do that. I do that, moon in the second house, because the moon is public and second house is making money. So putting those two things together, I make a lot of money in the public. Pretty much all my money is made in the public sector of life. And so it's important to be able to delineate between your value and the value of your bank account, and the value of you without all of those things. It's because your money, you're so focused on money. Your mind is so focused on money, and it's so important to know that there's more value out there than that. And I think it is a very sensitive placement, and I want you to know that. I understand that. I get it. And the finances of a moon and second house person is going to be kind of all over the place until you learn to really appreciate those ups and downs in life. And that's with any moon placement in any part of the chart. But in the second house, it's a very foundational. It's kind of like not feeling like the rug's going to be taken out from underneath you, over and over and over again. So just make sure that you're aware of those things as you can, and you go through life. And yeah, there's so much more I can talk about with this, but I feel like I've kind of spoken on enough, and I think a lot of it was just me gushing about my own moon second house. But I hope this helped you guys, honestly, the other moon second housers out there, and I would love, obviously, to hear your story. Feel free to put that down below. But yeah, I really, like I said, I think I said this in the last video I did too, where I do this because I really want to help people, and I really hope that this video was able to help you if you have your moon in the second house or the moon in Taurus, to be able to teach you more about your emotional reactions to things and how you emotionally respond, and whether or not you are feeling emotionally secure in your financial sector, things of that nature. And I think I really just urge you to take astrology with a grain of salt. Take what I take with a grain, or what I say with a grain of salt, and be able to look at yourself in a whole perspective. And to do that, you do need to have a bigger picture of your whole chart, because the moon sign is not necessarily all of it, but it is important. It is very important to understand your moon sign, but it is something that is kind of like the tip of the iceberg in regards to how deep you can understand and deep you can go within this field. And so I appreciate you for being here. I appreciate you for listening. I appreciate you for going through and taking an interest in this. And obviously, as you know, with YouTube, if you want to like, subscribe, comment, all those things, you can do that down below. That would mean the world to me. Let the world know that, you like my stuff. So, but yeah, at the end of the day, I love this. I love doing this. I appreciate you for being here and listening to all of me just ramble for all of this time. And yeah, I hope your moon in the second house journey was not as difficult as mine, is not as difficult as mine, but also I hope that it has given you as much richness and value as it has me within my own life. And I really hope that this video as well has been able to show you that there is value on the other end of the ups and downs that the moon can cause in the second. And so yeah, I just really appreciate you for being here. I really enjoy doing this. And if you guys have any questions, if you guys want to book a reading with me, or of course, look at my beginner's course or any of my other courses, those are down below as well. And yeah, I appreciate you guys so much. And thank you. And I will talk to you guys soon. Bye.